Hey, my name is Patrick Curtis, CEO and founder of Wall Street Oasis. Today we have a really fun chat with Nicholas Lamb. Nicholas is a sophomore at Brown University. Really love this chat because his background's super different. Ended up going to culinary school before going to Brown. Then listen what was really surprising about his informational interviews, his coffee chats, and really how crazy high his conversions were. Really just like stunning. I don't think I've ever heard conversions this high. So I was really trying to dig into that and figure out, what his secret was. And not too surprising once he revealed it, but definitely take a listen. Enjoy. All right, Nicholas, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you for having me here.
So it'd be awesome if you could just give the listeners kind of a short summary bio of kind of where you're from and all that good stuff.
Of course. So I actually grew up in Hong Kong, one of my favorite city in the world, and I decided I want to go to boarding school. So I went to school right outside of Boston, picked up a little bit of math, and gone to the quantitative side a
Wait,
little bit.
where'd you go to boarding school?
Andover?
Yeah, I did too. Did you know I'm Van Overgraph?
No way. No,
Yeah,
I
dude,
didn't.
yeah.
Wait, that's insane. That's insane.
98 though. I'm old.
That's crazy. I was class of 22.
Wow.
And then
I
yeah,
grew
I
up in
took a
Andover. I was a day student.
no way.
Yeah, yeah,
Wait,
yeah.
that's crazy. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. So,
Um,
okay, so go ahead. We
but
just
yeah,
learned something new about each
really.
other.
Really loved Andover. And then I actually decided to go to culinary college. So I went there for 1 year. So that was a very interesting talking point in the recruiting process. And then I
You
went
went to
to,
culinary school.
yeah, I did French
Oh, that's
culinary school
that's so
based in France and Hong
interesting.
Kong. Yeah.
And you were you thinking of becoming like an executive chef or something like that?
I really wanted to. I was exploring
Hmm.
how the chef life is. But, I really like working with people you would never ever see in
Yeah,
finance or at school. So, all the professionals in the field and learning a lot about gastronomic theory and going to class and
that's
learning
so
about
cool,
theory. I
man.
thought it's really cool.
That's really cool.
Um, but after that, I went to Brown, and then before recruiting happened, I actually interned at a VC firm, a search fund based in New York, and also a middle market PE firm, and secured a sophomore summer middle market PE firm internship in New York. So, those also helped me, and I think those combined just made me really want to continue a career in
Yeah.
finance.
So, when you're kind of going into Brown, like you do the culinary thing, which is kind of like out of left field, but
Hmm.
okay, you do that. You're like, no,
Yeah.
you know what? I'm going to go to Brown. When you kind of come in freshman year, is it something where you know right away, like finance is something I want to do, equity research, banking?
Yeah.
Is that on the radar? It is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
banking research has always been on the radar. I actually, so going back, my dad, he worked in finance. He started in finance at least.
Hmm.
And he would come home, he'd be very excited about some deals that he would close. And I really was inspired by that. And because of that, I decided to join like the investment group at Brown. And then
Cool.
that sort of really got me to stocks and banking. And even though my dad left the industry, he still inspires me to this day.
Cool. So you were kind of getting involved on campus. Now,
Hmm.
when you decided to go to Brown, did you know like were you looking at other schools or were you like, hey, Brown's a good place for me, you visited and you liked it kind of thing? Is
Actually, yeah, I didn't apply to college with a finance mindset. So I didn't know what semi-targets were,
yeah.
but I just knew that from a cooking, having a cooking background, I thought Brown was just the perfect place to explore like that sort of artsy
Yeah. Culinary
side.
arts.
And
Yeah.
and and Brown, we have the open curriculum, so you can literally take whatever you want. And I really enjoyed that. And the people are just so diverse, and there's so many different kinds of people who I
Cool.
loved about Brown. I applied ED, so I
Nice.
didn't really look
You,
at
you knew, you
schools.
knew where to go. Okay.
Yeah, I knew
So
where to
you're kind of
go.
like you're coming in, once you're on campus, I assume you kind of got caught up into a little bit more of like, hey, okay, you should do second sourcing position for search fund or whatever. And so you
Hmm.
did
Hmm.
that. It sounds like you stacked things pretty successfully,
Yeah, yeah,
kind of going through there. Any kind of tips on, because I think you joined us not until the summer of, was it summer
yeah. I think it
24?
was end of summer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
September.
after
So
my
like
few of my
maybe August,
internships. Yeah.
September, we started talking, and then you were in the September cohort. So like you were already kind of about to go into not, RBC was open.
Yeah.
Like they're still always super early, but you were early enough where it wasn't like a crazy rush, but you did also have some good internships kind of leading in to
Hmm.
that. So talk to me a little bit about
Um,
that. Like, did
I'd
he
say
guide you on
I would
that, or is your dad like, go do this? Was it like friends on the campus?
no, no. My dad is was not that. supportive of what he actually wanted me to do, complete different things. That's why he wanted me to go cooking,
Yeah.
and explore my passions. But I knew from the investment group and just talking to my friends, I wanted to do finance. And I think the search fund was the most interesting thing there, and I had the most insight there. So, you know, even though recruiting started sophomore summer, I actually started technically recruiting for these like very small firms when I was a freshman. So I started reaching out to a lot of Brown alums. So the search fund I worked for, the two partners, oh, sorry, one of the partners went to Brown.
Hmm.
So I reached out to him. He came to campus, to our investment group to speak. And then, I applied to maybe 80 search fund level jobs when
Yeah.
I was a freshman. And for this company, I did a case study. I got a lot of help from, the mentors that
Mhm.
and like the seniors in the investment group. So I think, applying to everything you can, networking, even when you're a freshman, and then also utilizing the network that you already have at school is really important to
Yeah.
secure
So it
that
sounds like
first.
when you came to us, it sounds like you kind of knew the game, right?
Like
It's like you knew the game,
kind
like
of,
you knew the game, you realized, hey, I'm gonna have to talk to a lot of people to
yeah.
get into enough processes to help increase my odds. So like you were coming into this, it's not like you were lost, like I don't know what I want to do. So why even join us? You're part of the investment club, you're at an Ivy League school, you probably have a good G, you probably had a really high GPA, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So
Um,
yeah, tell me a little bit about like why that decision, because I think some people at some Ivies are like, well, why, right? And I know the answer, but like, from your perspective, what do you think? Why do you think you made that decision?
you know, I did think that I was very prepared, and I thought that, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I could kind of do it on my own if I really wanted to. But I was scrolling through Instagram and looking at your guys' history, and I realized that there's a few things that was really important to me. So first, that resume, the initial resume review, the screening and adjusting the resume really helped. So I kind of needed that, and that helped me secure a lot of first rounds at even like elite boutiques and even bulge brackets without networking at all.
Yeah.
So I was very happy about that. Second, and I think most importantly was the mock interviews. So I knew you guys had a lot of great head mentors and mentors, and I did 12, 10, maybe 12 mock interviews with you
A
guys.
lot.
And
A lot.
yeah, it's a
Yeah, I see
lot.
the ones that were graded. I think we got better
Yeah,
at like cracking the whip to make sure they were all graded, but I see the ones that you were graded were really high. So like I think you
yeah.
probably came in at already a pretty good level and then probably just got
Mhm.
even stronger.
Yeah, no, I literally just honed in. I found one or two people that I really, really enjoyed speaking to, and my technicals were, perfect. I think. And and
And so it's
also the
really
third thing,
story. It was
yeah,
really more story, like working on your story, your why, all that stuff. Yeah.
yeah. Well, technicals I learned from you guys.
Yeah.
But it was very helpful. I think those two, and then also keeping track of the timelines and when everything came out was very important to me too.
Did you attend any boot camps by any chance or no?
Yeah, I intended uh like the 2 day one. I think it
Yeah,
was
the long financial modeling evaluation is a
yeah,
painful
yeah,
one.
that
No,
one,
it's a
360
painful one.
modeling, the LBO, the M&A
Yeah,
model too. So
as a liberal arts guy, did you feel like you were struggling on the accounting stuff at first, or was it something you picked up on your own?
yeah,
You didn't attend the
no,
foundations boot camp or anything like that with us?
I remember I took accounting at
Yeah.
Brown.
Okay.
We actually don't have strong finance courses. Actually, we have maybe like
Yeah,
three or four.
not much.
Um, but you guys really helped solidify that math and that thinking and just the foundation. And I think the again the mock interviews were literally the best part of the program for me at least.
Yeah, and so you are kind of coming into this sophomore year. I feel like you're a pretty strong candidate already. You take academy, you're like, yeah, I'm going to make sure everything is in line. So
Hmm.
resume review, LinkedIn profile, all the good stuff. Talk to me a little bit about like your networking.
Yeah.
You had already kind of started doing that. Like you talked about 80 to 100 people, like or applications at least freshman year. I assume you were talking to people, but talk to me a little bit about like how you scale that up as recruiting kind of started getting going, say, call it October, November of your sophomore year.
Yeah. So after I got that resume in better shape, I started reaching out to mostly a lot of people from Andover, a
Yeah.
lot, and also from Brown. A lot of the Andover people were very helpful. But of course, we had Brown had a little bit bigger of a network,
Hmm.
and I started emailing them. And I think one thing that was very helpful if somebody, could do, is go visit. New York in person. So I remember I went to the Goldman office maybe 3 or 4 times actually. They let me into the Sky lobby, talk to VPs, talk to, analysts, talk to associates on the Brown recruiting team. Um, and,
In
just being
person,
very
very
in
powerful.
person. Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
literally the best part. I remember I think I visited the 15 banks in person. I went to inside their building in person. I think that's
And
what's the
so in
most
order to
fun.
kind of get taken up, you had like an in there, you had talked to an analyst or an associate or a
Um,
VP or something like that?
yeah, I
Yeah.
previously talked to an analyst associate, but also being a part of, the investment group, being a part of a nice circle, a finance circle also helps a lot because we had a few New York City trips. We had,
Yeah.
a lot of banks come to us and then into like our group specifically, and then I was able to visit them when I was in New York. So that was all very helpful.
That's awesome. Okay, so you're kind of doing all this networking. How many calls
Mhm.
total do you think, or meetings, one-on-one meetings or calls did you do by the time, say, the end of the year rolled around?
I actually think I didn't do as many calls as people expect. I would say 50 to 60, but I would say that every single call was very meaningful. I still, I
It's
think
targeted.
20 or
It was targeted.
yeah, and 20 or 30 of those calls, I ended up being able to text them on my phone and I would text them be like, hey, this happened, or they would text me or call me all of a sudden and be like, oh, congrats on your super day. So I think, it's not about, well, it is about quantity, but it's really about nailing each call you have,
That's really
and
impressive.
having
Tell me a
a
little bit
relationship.
about like that relationship building process, like when you're in an informational, because I think a lot of people, this
Yeah.
is where they struggle and where there's a lot of fear. How at what are you, 20 years old? 21?
Yeah, I'm 20, 21.
How
Yeah.
how at that age do you have the maturity? Is there something you did like a sales role or something where you were forced to like talk to 100 people a day? What got you so comfortable in kind of that type of there's upbringing where your parents started making
Um,
forcing you to public speak a lot when you were younger? Like
I think it was partly Andover. I was able to get out of my comfort zone, but also I think my cooking experience, I was talking to a lot of strangers, talking to a lot of people and clients.
Hmm.
They would come up to me, start yelling at me, and I'd have to sort of, go back to the kitchen and bring out a new dish. But also having those first few 5 calls and really like reflecting on them and being like, oh, what can I do better is really important. And then hitting on qualities or things that are very similar is also important. So I remember I was very close with a lot of international, students who ended up making it to banking.
Yeah.
So people from Hong Kong, people who went to boarding school, maybe people who really like cooking, and we would
Yeah.
just talk about like recipes and I would look at their belly app, something like that. Just some forming some connection and really hitting on it is
Yeah,
really
so you
important.
weren't so much focused on like, let me just talk about myself or my career.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
a lot of like interest-based targeting, affinity groups targeting around like
hmm
history of
hmm
their backgrounds,
hmm
which is really powerful, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're going into this like transactional, we know that doesn't work as well. If you go in this develop relationships where you're on like a texting basis, your odds of
Yeah.
getting those offers is so much higher. Okay, so you're kind of doing all this, you're having impactful, really good informationals. You get to what, a few super days, one super day done, and you're happy and you get your dream job. Tell me about how it like all worked out in terms of timing.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
timing, I remember I applied to all the banks January, December, and then, oh man,
It's like a blur now. You know,
it's kind of like a blur, but I would say that there are a few super days that I got, but it's still a long process. I got through networking. So for example, Goldman, I had 3 super days for them. Banking, S&T, uh, um, private investing.
Yep.
Um, and then private investing is the one that I got. And then like MS, I got the early insights program actually without networking at all, without any connections, just pure resume pull.
Great.
So that led to a first round, and then I had the super day after.
Nice.
I had actually like Guggenheim, for example, gave me first round and second round and super day, pure resume pull. Nomura, I got the offer, pure resume pull, no networking there. And then I had a few other um, like banks through networking that I was able to get super days for. So I actually had I mean, I can't
You
believe
had
it.
a
I
lot.
had
That's a
a
lot of
lot
super
of
days.
super
So
days. I
so
think I had
first
like
rounds
double-digit
probably
super days. Yeah, I
you had double digit super days. So first rounds must
think
have been like 20 or something crazy.
so. Yeah,
That conversion's
something like
insane,
that.
man. That
But I,
conversion is
I I think
really high.
I converted all my first rounds.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's impressive. We're gonna have to have you come coach all the kids soon. I'm just kidding.
No, I
No,
don't think
so
I would
I mean
care.
that's that no, honestly, that's some of the best conversions I've heard in a long time. I was speaking with someone today earlier who at SMU that got placed
Hmm.
into Rain Group, really
Oh,
strong
nice.
group.
Great.
And
Yeah.
he had really strong conversions too, but I think he had similar number of like calls, like really impactful, really well spoken. But I think he ended up at like with six super days or five super, like similar to you, not but not double
Hmm.
digit. Double digits
Hmm.
really impressive. Um, so yeah, so I guess looking through it, like in terms of timing, when you got the Morgan Stanley offer, was it like was it something like you finished the super day, they call you right after? Tell me a little bit about like the day of
Um,
what the interviews were like. Were they, it's
yeah.
equity research, right? So they were like grinding you on like DCF and like pitch me a stock. Like what was that like?
Yeah. So like I applied to so many, I applied to like banking, research, and I applied
Yeah,
to
and then you
everything
did
basically under the
S&T
sun.
too. Like, do you have to do a super day
Um,
for S&T, which is different, right? It's like,
yeah, GSS was definitely different. But I realized the reason I chose research was because over banking, I had a few other banking offers, was because like I really like stocks and I realized that I really like, really getting down to the fundamentals of a company.
mhm.
And in terms of the actual interview process, yeah, just DCF, like, pitch me a stock. I remember they asked me like what were these numbers in this year, like how much they spend in CapEx in this year, and I had to memorize all of that stuff. And a lot of behaviorals too. So, a lot of the bulge brackets they look for fit and not just competency in the technicals.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then, so basically, assuming when you got that offer, it was like an immediate yes once you, because you knew research was kind of like the
Um,
or close to.
it was immediate. It was pretty much an immediate yes.
Yeah.
I think it took a week to hear back though, a week and a
Oh,
half.
wow.
I was a
Okay.
little bit scared. I was like, oh, okay, maybe I didn't get it.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
took a little bit, and then I got it, and I was weighing that GS, I was
Mhm.
weighing UBS, banking. I was weighing.
Yeah.
I still had some other offers that weren't expired yet,
Yeah.
but I really really love stocks, and I really like industrials. I really like the aerospace
Yeah.
industry, and
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to go into that and really study that
That's cool.
for at
That's
least the first
awesome,
few
man.
years of my life.
So, like, yeah, in terms of just looking back at your whole, I mean, what strikes me is your conversions are ridiculously high. But talk to me a little bit about just like advice you'd give to students in a similar position. Maybe they kind of know what they want to do, like in terms of how you approached. Because I think what we could learn from you is more like how that personal connection you're making and the affinity, how you actually really identified great affinity groups. Now, of course,
Hmm.
you have the benefit of going to Ivy League and going to a strong boarding school where you can grab some of those. But I think the
Yeah,
culinary thing is super interesting because it's just another easy topic to discuss
yeah,
and get away from the boring topics and
yeah.
get to like who you are as a person, right? So talk to me
Hmm.
a little bit about that. Like, is that something you'd recommend, like putting weird interests on your CV?
I mean, yeah,
Like being
I
interesting?
think sort of being interesting and having something that people can remember you by is really, really, really important. The cooking thing, I would go through my tell me about yourself, and once you get to the cooking thing, they would start drilling me on questions for cooking. I remember in my GS banking super day, one of the three interviews, the the whole interview was about cooking. It was 20 minutes of cooking.
I'm
And he
sure.
would ask me about recipes. He would
He
ask,
probably
and
loved it. He probably was like, "This is so much better than the other candidates because I can
yeah,
I can learn something." He probably just wanted to learn from you.
yeah. And also the networking calls really helped. And I also
Yeah.
think, so I really think, standing out, but also making sure that the bankers can talk about themselves and bond with you over something. I really never made my networking calls transactional. I never ever asked for a referral, actually, not even indirectly. I
Mm.
sort of let them come to me and be like, oh, we really like you. Or I just had a few calls, many calls over time. I am, really forming that personal relationship and having something to remember you by. So that cooking for me
How did you
is the
do
most important.
that specifically when you didn't know a lot about their background? So how did you
Um,
guide the conversations to be more informal? and more
Yeah.
like relationship building. Like when, let's say you did the standard email network, LinkedIn network thing, you get on a call, how do you guide it in that direction? Is it just naturally go there because your background's more interesting? Or is it,
Um,
tell me about that.
yeah, I
Because
think
a lot of kids can't do that. I can tell you just from experience, like a lot of it becomes, tell me about your career and your jump here and wow, that's impressive. And then it's like
um,
formal.
it's a lot about honestly reading the room as well. So you have
Yeah.
to when you're talking to the banker, you already know, I think within the first 1 or 2 minute, whether it's going to be a chill call,
Mhm.
whether you have to, really talk about banking and show your interest in banking, or, and again, going back to finding affinity and finding something to talk about, the people that I think it's, but obviously a lot of like, some of my calls, I really had to go into banking and talk and ask, you
Yeah.
know,
So it wasn't like all of them.
about
You
the
could just be
job.
like buddy
It was
buddy or
not,
anything
no,
like
no, it
that.
definitely wasn't.
You don't
But,
have some
reading,
magic like thing, but I
yeah,
think, yeah,
reading that room is really important. And you can tell if you're asking banking questions and they don't really like it either. So I would, kind of transition a little bit
yeah.
or try to bring up something
And they're like,
interesting.
oh wait, he's not just gonna ask me his list of
Yeah,
scheduled
yeah,
questions about my
yeah.
career. He can actually pivot, which is
And with those scheduled questions, like I never had a list. I would say I would have, so for example, if I was talking to somebody in Levin, which I
Mhm.
did talk to a lot of people in Levin,
Yeah.
I would have maybe 3 or 4 maximum questions that were very specific to Levin. But
Yeah.
then every other question just came off the top of my head, and it was a question about the last thing we talked about.
The flow.
So
You
yeah,
went with the flow of the conversation. You weren't trying to
yeah,
force it, or otherwise it
hmm
feels like
yeah.
it doesn't feel like
And
this.
then also,
Yeah.
I think it's important to say things, for example, if I'm telling about the cooking things, that invites a lot of questions, right? You can't just say everything, put everything down on the table, and they're like, they kind of get stuck, like you have
Yeah,
to
that's
make sure that they're interested and engaged and they want to make sure they want to ask questions too.
yeah, you'd have a great career in sales, man, if you ever did it. If you ever wanted to do
No.
it. It's the same thing. It's the same exact thing. It's
Yeah.
just like you're learning to connect with people, you're learning to hear, listen really well, respond to it. I think obviously your story is one I've seen many times, but I think what strikes me about you is how crazy how your conversions were. So I hope
Mhm.
everyone's listening and taking notes because I think I'm taking notes here. But yeah, no, Nicholas, I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you.
And yeah, hopefully we'll stay in touch.
Thank you so much.
Awesome, man.